Welcome everyone to Cerulean Arts Korean Studio for the virtual tour and talk for the exhibition, The Figure, Light, Form, and Motion. It features artwork by John Horn, Harold Kalmus, Carolyn Pyfrom, Bruce Samuelson, and Patricia Traub. Now, unfortunately, both Bruce and Patricia can't be with us tonight. So it's going to be Harold, Carolyn, and John, and me, and you. So that's where we're at. The exhibition is up through April 23rd. So I hope you can come down and see it. Everything is also available on our website. We are recording the talk. So after the fact, I'll edit and put it on our YouTube channel. So you can see it again or send it to your friends if they didn't get to see it for posterity. And so I'm going to spotlight Tina's camera. So this is the exhibition proper. So Harold, maybe we'll start with you.
Okay.
So Harold has done the sculptures in the exhibition. So please tell us about yourself and your sculpture and everything.
Okay, well, thanks. First, I want to thank Michael and Tina for inviting me into this show and putting on such an incredibly great show. Really so happy to be part of it. I'm the sculptor in the group. Well, actually, I'm one of the sculptors in the group, but I'm the only one showing sculpture in the group. A little history, I went to Philadelphia College of Art, which now you always have to say is now the University of the Arts. And I was very fortunate because I got there at a time when there was a lot of silliness going on in the art schools. I think there still is, but I was very fortunate to find a few people to study with who actually had real information to impart and who also were sort of very generous in giving us the means to figure out what to do with that information. One of those people was a figure sculptor, and that's sort of where it all began for me. I just had a natural affinity for it. So I got out of school and I had this skill. Like I said, I thought I was pretty good. But I had no idea at that point what to do with it. I spent a few years making some pretty, I'll be generous and call it mediocre sculpture. And then just sort of figured, I just didn't know what to do anymore. I was never one to make a sculpture and stick it on a pedestal. A lot of figure sculpture, they're pretend neoclassicists and they make a figure and they stick a trident in its hand and call it Zeus or whatever he had, or a thunderbolt, I don't know. And I could just not do that. So I gave up for a good 25 years or so. So I kind of stepped away. But in that time, I never really stopped thinking. I never stopped considering myself a sculptor, and I never stopped thinking about it. And I dabbled. I had always had a little shop going, or a little studio, or whatever you want. Anyway, that went on for quite some time. I did some other things, and then back in 2009, when the financial meltdown occurred, I found myself with a lot of time on my hands, and I just jumped back into it full force. And this is the era where these three sculptures came out of. They were some of the first things that I did when I started getting back into it seriously. Coincidentally, I just dragged 4 others from that era to the dump a few months ago because they're just too big and they take up too much space and they just weren't very good. That's where it came. I've always had this, part of what I learned was anatomy in school, and it was something I was always very taken with, just the structure, the bone structure, which is rigid and fixed, and then the muscles and these antagonistic forces and the push and the pull and the symmetry and the breaking of the symmetry, and then the flesh and the fat following along for the ride. And it was just endlessly fascinating to me. And I kind of stuck with it. It was what I knew how to do, and it was what I loved to do. And when I came back to things, this is what I went back to. I've thought of straying and just never saw a good enough reason to. So I guess I can talk about these three sculptures in particular. Don't have a lot to say about them. We'll start with this one since it's on the screen. It's called Julia Making Shadow Puppets, the Goat. First, on a technical basis, I worked very, very hard to make the fingers, the shadow puppet work, and it worked quite well. But when you make a sculpture, the arms need to be cut. A sculpture like this, I needed to cut the arms off to cast it. And when they went back on, it was never quite the same. So if you get a pinpoint light and do it just right, it works. But with any kind of general light source, it looks much like a goat. I feel a little hesitant saying this in a show with Patricia Traub, but I put a lot of animals in my sculpture, or the inference of animal in this case with the shadow puppet, or with the wishbone in the other one, or literally with the bird. Years ago, I read a quote, and I'm pretty sure it was from Lucian Freud, who said that he just liked to think of humans as one more animal, as just another animal. And that really hit me. That really struck, that I just liked that, and I took it. And I'm working on two things now that have animals in them. So anyway, I started with the goat sculpture, the shadow puppet. My work comes from two methods of thought. One is that I just have an image in my head, and the longer that image sticks around and evolves, the more confidence that I get in it, and then eventually I'll decide, okay, it's time to actually make a sculpture out of this. Sometimes these images last for weeks, and sometimes for years. And eventually I get around to them, and often I get halfway through them and say, oh, not such a bad idea, not such a good idea anyway, even though I've spent all this time starting them. So I either work that way, or else I'll set myself either a problem, a question, or a puzzle, and I'll go about finding the image to illustrate that. And that is sort of my method. That is my method. That is what I do and how I go about doing it. And anyway, so that was the goat sculpture. If you're looking for any in-depth analysis of it, the only thing I'll offer, and I say this with a grain of salt, but the goat traditionally being the symbol of, randy old men. And here we have the woman figure who is sort of in total control of this goat and able to make it disappear at any time. So there is a complete control there from that aspect. I've always liked the idea of puppets and sort of control by proxy. And actually, I'm working on a sculpture now that it's two figures and two marionettes. So the bird sculpture, again, just started with an image. I saw a show of someone who was doing these absolutely stunning falcon photographs. And I was just so taken, I couldn't get those photos out of my mind. These birds were just so beautiful. and they had just these intense stares. And so what I tried to do here was sort of match the figure with the stare of the figure in the bird, even though I know the bird's looking to the side naturally, but which is why the head of the bird is way up at eye level with the figure, sort of a compositional trick. I don't know. Trick's not the right word. I thought it was a little bit, I thought it might be taken wrongly, but I kind of like that it's right up front, sort of blocking the view of the face, except for the eyes. The third sculpture is the wishbone. It's called Wishbone. This came about, start with a little story. Am I going on too long, Michael? Am I okay?
No, that's fine.
Okay, all right. Bear with me a moment. This story actually makes sense in the end. When we first bought a house, it had this god-awful light fixture in the kitchen. It was this sort of fake brass, horrible chandelier. So over the course of the years that we were in this house, instead of getting a new light fixture, we basically took the wishbone from every bird we ever cooked and hung it on the light fixture. And it was just, it improved the light fixture a lot. And I just always had these wishbones in my mind. We moved, lost the wishbones, but the thought of wishbones stuck. So I put out a call one Thanksgiving for all my neighbors. Whoever had a giant turkey, I needed a wishbone. I don't know if that is the original wishbone or if I made a mold. I don't remember. Nevertheless, this is nothing more than a compositional study in V shapes. There's the obvious V of the wishbone. There's the V of the hands. There's the V of the cross arms. There's even sort of a V forced into the belly button. And if I looked hard enough, remember it's a long time ago I made this, I could probably find some more V's in there, but I always like this one. Anyway, that's what I've got to say about the three sculptures. I'll be happy to answer any questions after everyone else gets their turn. And thank you.
Thank you, Harold. So Carolyn, would you like to speak?
Oh, goodness. I am never quite sure what to say about my work,
Well,
but
you could begin a little bit with about yourself.
Okay. Harold did such a beautiful job. I'm still thinking about what Harold said. I think, well, I don't have anything that interesting to say about my own work. Yeah, okay, about myself. I'm from Alabama. Is that interesting? I'm from Alabama.
Yes.
I studied there as an undergraduate, and I went to work in Japan for a little while and saved some money, and then I went to Italy to an atelier, and I spent 4 years there and got, I guess, what's called a classical training, but I don't know if that really is true. It's sort of a new thing anyway, it's a reinvented kind of classical training. And I don't know, I've just been interested in the figure ever since I was a young person. And I moved to Philadelphia after, I guess I followed my husband, who was my boyfriend here. He's from Philly, and been here since 2002, which is a long time, I guess. And I've sort of been in the orbit of PAFA since that time, but sort of drifting out, maybe drifting in and out. I don't know. I'm out at this point, maybe drift in, more like a comet than a planet, perhaps. Some folks have been at PAFA. Well, I guess it's like a flash in the pan compared to how long some folks have been at PAFA. but that's sort of my community here in Philly, and that's how I know Mike, right?
Yes, that's right. We
That all that while
started in
20 some,
continuing ed. Yes.
that's right. Yeah. Um, yeah, and these paintings here were done at PAFA, the small ones. Always paint alongside my students, so that I can kind of keep something going. I kind of remind myself what to do as I paint. I'm not like, I think Anthony was saying before we started that he's the kind of person who forgets what he's seen after he goes home or something. And I'm the kind of person who forgets how hard it is to paint if I'm not doing it while I'm teaching. So I remind myself how hard it is by teaching while painting while teaching, if that makes sense. Because otherwise I remember, oh my goodness, this is what you do. Otherwise I forget what you do. So these were painted, I guess pretty much about an hour at a time, alongside my students. And then, we have a continuing pose, and then I critique the students. The larger painting was done in my studio here, over time. Got a metamorphosized over time. Started out as a still life painting, and then I added the figure as a last desperate attempt to salvage the painting, because I hate to lose a painting. I'm just somebody who doesn't like to give up. And I didn't like it, and so I had a lovely model I was working with. I was doing a lot of things with her, and I just asked her if she would mind coming in and posing for me. And so she just posed for me last fall. I guess kind of wrapped it up right before the holidays. So that's a recent finish. Started quite some time back, well before the pandemic, and just sat on the floor for a while.
So
yeah,
Carolyn, are you working from direct observation?
Almost exclusively. Although when I've been experimenting, I started sort of experimenting with illustrations, no good reason and no plan, like everything in my life. And that kind of got me on a attack, I guess, of just feeling like, you know what, I've maybe got enough experience, maybe, for lack of a better word, with a figure that maybe I can sort of start trying to make things up, work a bit from memory. So especially coming off my trip from Italy, I'm working on some things sort of out of mind, if you will. But I'll get a model in to sort of help me finish them, shore them up, but sort of planning them, sort of drawing them out of my head. These are all done from observation, what you're looking at here.
So can you talk a little bit about your technique?
Oh, my technique is just crazy random. I don't know. I am reckless. I was just like, oh, whatever. I don't know. Scrape it off, try again. I think I have in my head this idea that I want to organize the values toward with something, I guess in that sense, it is classical. There's this sort of a unified wholeness that I want to come up with. Don't know that I come up with so much with a sense of light. It was what I was taught to try to do. But yeah, I think I'm trying to come up with sort of a unified idea in the painting and a sort of organized value and color to that. And I don't know that I'm very I don't know, even less and less methodical as I age. I think I don't like to be beaten up by my paintings. So I don't know, I'll wipe it off, try again. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think so. So, I mean, your focus seems to be light and color, not so much like meticulous structure and anatomy.
Right, right.
I mean, there's a
Yeah, I
figure,
guess that's
but
fair.
I mean, there's a figure, but it's locked into a composition
Hmm.
of background.
Right.
The things merge.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I'm interested in building a composition, first of all, an abstraction, an interesting arrangement of shapes. Um, I think that would be the first thing I would think about, and then kind of keep trying to think about the whole canvas the whole time, which can be a little bit unwieldy. The smaller it is, I guess, maybe the more manageable that project is. Yeah, I think I'm definitely interested in, I think I'm certainly mm, interested in the abstraction. I may have more in common with someone like de Kooning than, I don't know, when you think of some like a realist painter. I feel that kinship more, probably material, the paint, um, shape and color.
Yeah, I mean, the paint and brushwork is very evident.
Yeah, no, I'm a sucker for the material. I really love juicy paint on there. I wish I could do more. I feel like I'm a person I'll back off maybe a little too readily. My painting is a place, I think I'm a very kind of sheepish, quiet, timid person to start with. But painting's a place where I'm gonna sort of exercise some I don't know, that power that I wish I had, it's where I'd like to kind of be that person I'd like to be, maybe.
That's great. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
So, John, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Mike.
Huh. So, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and
Yeah, I studied at PCA as well, and I studied with Walter Erlbacher, who was also, I would consider a mentor. I spent a lot of time with him outside of the classroom at his home. He's a very interesting individual. Unfortunately, he died way too young. He was my biggest influence, I think. In terms of the drawings, these are very quick sketches, which I consider to be the most difficult kind of drawing. And I say that because in order to pull them off successfully, you need to know a lot. I'm not trying to brag saying I know a lot, but it's a demonstration of what you know, much more so than a studied drawing from my point of view. So that's why I like to exhibit these. And these are from the model. And it's the only time I really work from the model is doing rapid sketches. I don't make a drawing from the model that's posed more than 5 minutes. These are actually 1.5 minute poses. And in terms of sculpture, I don't have any in the show. I'm working on some pieces at the moment. I never work from the model anymore. And that's not an economic reason. That's by choice. I don't know.
what's your rationale for that?
Well, at one point, I realized that, and I would think this goes for painting as well. Really good sculpture. Well, I guess with the exception of Rodin, and I sometimes wonder, it's certainly true of his most famous piece, The Age of Bronze, which he somehow it's a classical 19th century pose from the Academy, and yet he transformed it, into something else. that one arm he has up in the air, it's the model was holding a stick. If you need a little bit of a push to visually to see what it is that I'm talking about. But for me, most of the art that I really, really like, the sculpture, was not made directly from models. And again, I give him as the exception. And that goes for contemporary work too. I greatly admire Italian sculpture, not just historically, but also, contemporary, what we would call figurative sculpture. But the really strong sculpture, the sculpture that really impacts me emotionally, is Egyptian sculpture. It's usually sculpture that's made predominantly by cultures rather than individuals. So what I mean by that is Egyptian sculpture, Greek sculpture, with its various periods of, archaic, classical, and Hellenistic. Even Roman sculpture, which I don't really think is that good, but it still leaves an impact, which I think is a reflection really of how strong Greek sculpture was. I like very much the sculpture that's on the Gothic cathedrals, particularly the French ones. I find, well, there is none really. There's some in northern Italy, but it never really got further south than Milan. I think maybe you could argue that some of the churches in Florence or Gothic influenced. But it's the French that really, those French or the Norman architects who designed them, I think, are just really wonderful in themselves, and the sculpture that surrounds them. And of course, then the Renaissance. Michelangelo didn't have people come in his studio and hold poses. He designed things and then carved them. That would you say, what was my rationale, Mike? Is that what you?
Well, just curious, what your philosophy was toward.
Yeah.
So you teach as well, right, at the Academy and New York Academy?
Yeah, I do teach, and I pretty much teach nuts and bolts courses in anatomy and structural analysis and how to set up things, put them in space, perspective in drawing, how to put a figure in space technically, meaning with using perspective, and then the application of anatomy on top of that. And then I teach anatomy sculpturally as well. So I teach an écorché class, and then I teach a class that does an écorché of just the head and an écorché of the arm.
And an écorché is
it's French for flayed figure. I don't know French, but that's what I'm told it means. It may mean something else, but it makes sense to me. I think it's also a form of torture, if I'm not mistaken. And there's some very, very famous paintings of saints having their skin removed. I'm sorry, I went into a dark thing.
Apollo.
But it's basically a demonstration of the structure of the figure, based on the skeleton structure, and then the muscles that allow that structure to move, or the muscles, I'm sorry, that make the structure of the skeleton move. So it's pretty much technical nuts and bolts.
Are there any questions for John or Carolyn or Harold from the audience? Ritva, you look like you have something to say.
Hello, everyone. I really find this very interesting. Actually, everything I heard. I don't really have well, maybe one question for Carolyn. How thick are these paintings? I want to see these live, but while I'm waiting to come there, how thickly do you paint?
I don't know how, I probably not that thick. I mean, in places I'll put the plaster, the stuff on. I mean, I saw a Ying Li painting recently and that just had, it was a sculpture. I was like, wow, that's a beautiful amount of paint. I can't get that much on and control it. So I don't know what I'd have to, I don't know, I have to ask somebody else how much paint. I don't know. I don't know that there's a whole lot.
Yeah, they don't seem very thick. I mean, they have texture that's subtle.
Yeah. I don't know if they'll survive, you know, 500 years from now, if anybody's still around looking at painting. Yeah, I don't know about that technically. Probably okay, I would guess. Probably not too thick.
And I just have a comment to John. I mean, unbelievably how fast those drawings are done. I know how difficult it is. And it's also interesting what you said, that it is the most difficult form of drawing to do these fast drawings.
Okay, well, I guess we'll look at some of Bruce's works on view, even though he's not here. John, Carolyn, Harold, if you have your thoughts about Bruce and his work, that would feel free to weigh in. I know Carolyn and John, your colleagues at the Academy. Yes.
Yeah, I don't really, the only thing I do know a little bit about Bruce is his philosophy, and it's, build up, tear down, build up, tear down. I don't know if he works directly from the model or not. So some of his work takes, a day or a week, and others take months. Because I guess during this process, it's like, I guess, mining for gold. If you find some quickly, that's great. But if you don't, you got to keep panning until you find more.
Yeah, it can be deceptive as if it's
And
spontaneous.
they have a very fresh, like I just did them, off the cuff of my sleeve or something like that. So, I'm sorry, but I wanted to say hi to Ritva. That I haven't seen her for a long time, and it's really good to see you.
Yeah, this one, here's one.
Likewise.
It's a mix. This is a mixture of oil, charcoal, and pastel on paper. I mean, you can see the figure, but it's suggested, and it moves. It's abstracted and moving in and out of the field here. So it seems to pulsate almost, which is a tricky thing to do, to get that sense of life. We'll scoot down. And here's another. I mean, he takes very interesting poses for his figures or composition. It's like not the usual, stereotypical pose. I mean, he crops them. I mean, they have a Degas quality compositionally, I think.
See, I can't speak to composition, but the figures, they always sort of remind me of, this may sound very odd, is almost Michelangelo-esque in their superhumanness. They're not, they're not human, they're superhuman. They're humans pushed to a limit.
Yeah, the surface is bulging and receding. Yeah. It's like pulsating, which his drawings and sculptures have that feeling.
That is one of the higher compliments you can give somebody. So
I'd say so.
Like that patch of blue in there.
Right, just enough contrast to
Mhm.
make it pop. And then there's a Patricia Traub drawing here that we'll take a look at. So Pat, I mean, she's very interested in old master tools and techniques. I mean, this is like a 3-color drawing, black, white, and a little bit of red, and a little bit of color there as well. It's a study for one of her larger paintings, which tend to feature human figures and animals together, like coexisting. They're not in conflict. They're not really interacting. They're just together, which gives them an interesting kind of tension. We'll come around to one of her paintings called 3 Goats and 2 Humans, an oil on wood panel, this one.
Although someone did point out to me last at the reception that there are 4 goats in that picture.
Yeah, I want to ask her about that.
Mhm.
It must mean something.
See, it almost seems to me like a stage set, and the goats in the foreground are the audience.
Yes.
I always think that the thing is there that we are all connected. We're not separate.
That's true. Yeah, I think that's her aim, is to show we exist with these creatures, and we need to govern ourselves accordingly. This is called Dancing Man and Lion, oil on board. It's under glass, so it's a little bit hard to read. And this is Woman, Sheep, and Safety Net.
Maybe it is about that connection.
Well, yeah, they're definitely roped together here. All right, well, so were there any last questions for anybody? Artists, do you have any questions for each other? I mean, how do you feel about this show as a unit being put together with people you may or may not know?
Well, I personally felt honored that they would let me show with them. I mean, and I'm not saying that, you know, glibly. I'm serious. I felt honored to be able to show with everyone, with all 4 of them.
I
Oh,
certainly felt the same.
ditto that. Yeah, definitely. Oh, it's beautiful.
And I like the different approaches to the use of the figure as well. So I really like it very much.
All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, we will call it here. So
thank you so much. It's an amazing exhibition. I will see it live.
I'm good. Hope you can all come down. It's, as I said, it's up through April 23rd. And it's also, you can see it on the website, but it's, definitely great if you could come down and see it in person.
Thank
So
you
thank
very
you, Harold,
Thank you.
Carolyn, and John, and thank everybody for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
have a
all.
great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.